Good show lined up. We have the Erpy men in the house. The closer, Xavier Erpy, the Antonio Banderas of finance, Alex Erpy, the social media ninja, Nicholas Erpy, the distinguished gentleman, Keith Smith. We have Judah Wickhauer, our moral compass and North Star. I'm Jerry. There's Liza the dog. It's going to be about an hour plus of a lot of fun and content that we think is approachable and easily to understand. Gentlemen, how are you feeling before we start the show?
Feeling good.
Never better, as they say.
It's a beautiful morning.
It is a beautiful morning.
It's a beautiful morning.
My friend Nicholas, you?
I'm okay. Yeah.
You're okay. I really like that.
Okay. You gotta share a microphone.
The mischievous Erpy. I like the mischievous Erpy quite a bit. I really do.
The trick will be how many times we slap each other's hands. Give me the mic. Give me the mic.
We have the two guys that like to talk maybe the most, sharing the mic.
Maybe that was intentionally done.
I mean, this is gonna be fun just watching that dynamic right there. All right, guys, give the show a like and a share wherever you're watching. We're sharing and retweeting right now on Twitter. Judah Wickhauer, we are in your hands. We're gonna have a lot of fun. Quentin Beckham, hello. Yona, ¿qué pasa? How are you? Johnny Ornales, ¿qué pasa? ¿Cómo estás? Let's have some fun and let's rock and roll, J-Dubs. Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate, life, and the pursuit of happiness. We're live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network. Real Talk presented by Yes Realty Partners. Guys, Yes Realty Partners has over 3 decades of experience, and if you're talking combined experience, I would bet you a century of real estate experience on Yes Realty Partners. ISC, Interstate Service Company, a home's best friend, one of our title sponsors here of Real Talk. And if you look at the screen right now, you see the supply chain of just trusted advisors in the real estate game. Whether it's Charlottesville Settlement Company, whether it's our friend Scott Morris, whether it's Dairy Market, whether it's Segura Solar, American Pest, Pearl Certification, Dave Fafara at Shenandoah Joe's, people you can count on in real estate here in the Commonwealth. Judah Wickhauer is our director, and get ready for a show that is going to be absolutely phenomenal. William Clark, thank you for sharing. Johnny Ornales, thank you for sharing. Let's go to the studio camera and welcome the closer, the Antonio Banderas, the social media ninja, the distinguished gentleman. We love to give nicknames
love
here.
The monikers.
Good morning, Keith. How are you?
Good morning, Robin.
Thank you. Very good.
Since we're doing nicknames. Look, this is one of, we love these round tables. We love getting together. I love when the IQ is like off the charts sitting at the table. Yeah. So we're going to talk.
You mean the combined IQ?
Well, if you put me in, I might lower the average a little bit. But anyway, look, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about today. Inflation, right? I want to talk about a little bit about where the trends are going for the buyers and sellers. I just read an interesting report that within the net between 2020 and 2040. So I want to make sure I say this right.
Yeah, please get this right.
Is it Latinos, Latinx?
Latinos.
For
Latino.
Latinos is going to make up 70% of the new buyers, right?
Wow.
So
Amazing.
in the next 20 years, the Latino, the Latinx market is going to increase tremendously. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. We were talking yesterday on the show about the lack of diversity amongst real estate agents, frankly. And I think we're going to need to start figuring out a way to change that. So
you can count on one hand Latinos and African Americans in real estate in Central Virginia. Realtors in Central Virginia.
Wow.
In
So
fact, if you
yet caught
have to
up.
go to the second hand, it's maybe 1 digit on the second
On the
hand.
second hand.
I mean, think about that stat
Wow.
right there, Alex.
I know. Well, and just the contrast with how many are going to be buying now. Because you do want, let's face it, there's having known Latino real estate agents, in particular, one in particular who founded Ford Adelante, when you are a Latina or Latino in the business of real estate and you can corner that market, you can do very well for yourself. There's a connection there of saying, yeah, I trust this person. I'm Latino, she's Latina, we get along, I'm gonna go with her first. So there's a lot of benefit to be had when you are a Latino real estate agent in a community where a lot of the buyers are now Latinos.
And the question I have to ask myself, and as a CAR board member, why don't we have more Latino, let me just make sure I get this right.
Latino.
Latino.
Latino in Spanish encompasses
Male and female.
male and female.
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
the beauty of Spanish.
everybody.
One word can do both.
All right, I just don't want to get myself.
No, you're good. You're good.
Because Johnny will chase me down and beat me.
He's watching.
Yeah, but he happens to know I like that kind of stuff. But anyway, so what can we do, right? I'm on the board. What can we do to help motivate or help inspire folks to get into our industry that are Latinos? Because, if the stats are right, which I believe they are, your Latino is going to be the largest buying profile. I'm not talking about age. I'm just talking about the ethnicity on that. And jump in. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, I was going to say, you provided some statistics here, right? And one of the things that caught my eye is that if you look at the average age of real estate agents, it's on the upper end, right?
Yep.
So if you look at the Latino demographic, they're on the younger side. I mean, so that age group is pretty much, my age group. I'm being kind to myself, actually, because it's a little lower age, right? But anyway, the point being is that if you think about it, that's like 1955 when I was born. I came here in 1962. So how many Latinos were here during that time frame where now they're at my age, right? The age group that is there now for Latinos, they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge that you have that other people came up with. So I think, like everything else, there's a transition. And I'm pretty sure that over the next maybe 5-10 years, you're going to see a large number of Latinos starting to say, hey, I speak the language now, I speak 2 languages, so I can capture the Hispanic community, I can still capture the American community, right? And therefore, I can also sell homes. So I think it's going to happen. Some of these things you can't push, because how do you push it? The fact that there are more Latinos now also going to school, going to high school, going to college, you're going to begin to see that happen. And I think that's just part of how societies grow.
So as a young man, younger than here, so what?
Much younger.
Much younger, better looking, much younger.
Yeah, okay.
Just saying. What from your perspective, and because you fit in the millennial
Right.
Box, right? What can we do to help motivate young Latinos to get into business? I know Dad outlined
Number one, make money. You know why? Because the thing that drives people into industries is something called economic rent. It's the amount more that you're making than another industry.
Oh.
So as long as you're what it does is it drives people into that industry. And once the more people that are entering that industry, obviously will drive down the sort of like the competitive edge, and the competition sets in, right? That invisible hand and drives down. I mean, this is one of those like economic mechanisms that works in capitalism that keeps things both steady, but also, solves issues of, hey, there's not enough of certain, professions, and then so I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you're making more, if you have the typical family looking like, where should we enter? How do I lift my family up? What kind of job do I get? They're like, well, real estate agents, they make, the bundles, so they don't. But but that's a good way to do it.
But I think Alex wants to jump in here.
Well,
So
I'm not
I want to
saying
jump in with
pretend,
a
I'm just
question.
saying.
So I'm curious, what is the typical way in which real estate recruits further real estate agents? I'm curious what the method of doing
That's
that
his
is.
job. That's literally what he's supposed to do at Yes Realty Partners.
What is typically the way that it works?
I believe he's 100% right. It is in my contract. Mrs. Smith is working on the language end of it. She's actually studying Italian right now, and then she's going to move to Spanish. That whole, she speaks French fluently, so it should be a simple transition. She says, Keith, you're working on English. Let me handle the language. Let me handle the language stuff, okay? But look, that's a great question. Look, the struggle, as Jerry has put very fine point on it, let's call it what it is, the entry level to get a license is a little low.
Right.
The entry bar, right? The bar is low to go ahead and do that.
What's it cost? Like $1,200, right? What's it cost a year?
Yeah, cost a year, that's two different questions. To get in is a couple of grand, then, there's maintenance fees, and it costs several $1,000s a year to go ahead and do that. My wife and I spent dues, all that fun stuff.
So you basically launch a company for under $2K. Is basically what he's saying.
Yeah, it's a little more. It's a little more than that, but yeah. But the point is, it's not. You've got to build your pipeline, is what we call it, and that's the hard part, and that's the expensive part. And look, I may not make any friends by saying what I'm about ready to say, which I tend to do regularly, by the way.
And love when sentences start.
And I can just see his feet going like this.
Sentences start that way.
Let Smith put foot in mouth. Look, and this is the struggle, and this is what I wanted to really talk about. And I've had this conversation with Johnny, right? In order to get, we can help people get their license. We can help them go through the process. We can help them set up their business. But that's exactly what it is. It's their individual business. Right. They ride their license, so now they have to be able to run a business. They have to have the working capital to set up a business. They have to have a working capital to do that. And that's where the rubber kind of meets the road a little bit. And we generally have a conversation. If you wanted to get a license and come on in, I would say, look, do you have enough cash to survive for 6 to 12 months? If the answer is yes, then, from a math perspective, you've got it. If you walk in and want to make money right away, it doesn't work that way.
It's a couple of years. So, but what I'm
Maybe
curious.
that explains the age group.
But that,
Well,
it
in
does.
exchange to
You
age
already
group.
have that capital, and you say, okay, I now have enough capital that if it takes me 6 months or a year to build the book, I'm good.
Well, I think part of that is people been in it for 30 years, hit that certain age group. You don't really see a lot of people in the later ages jumping into it. I mean, you might. There's some stats of
When they retire, don't you get a lot?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you might be right. Again, you're right.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Well,
just-
No, he is right. You're right. There's a lot of
People
retired
roll-
people
what
who
I'm
jump in.
curious
It
about
happens
is
in a lot of
where.
industries where there's a service-based thing. If you've built up a connection like over the years, and we actually know people who actually have gone into not necessarily financial advice, but became asset gatherers, and marketing people, and the sense of you've built up connections, you're in your community, you know a ton of people, and you know how to talk to people because you've hit that age group where you can, you're more comfortable with talking to people and asking for things. And so you enter kind of late stage, almost like you don't need the income. It's sort of like, it's not a need-based job. You could see a lot of second income. You see a lot of, I'm just adding to my retirement so that I can, I guess keep active is not the number one thing I've always heard. It's sort of like, this way you're not sitting at home watching TV, or you're, I guess subsidizing your purchase ability because you're adding some income to yourself. But
So I'm guessing that's kind of where my question is, because it's sort of determining where the issue is. Is it that is the recruitment not happening because people haven't yet found the pool of Latinos with which to approach and say, here, I want you to do this, or are there a lot of Latinos in the pipeline that then get stalled at this point you're talking about,
so I think that's part of it, the stall. There's also roadblocks, let's face it, right? There's roadblocks that are thrown in front of folks because of their race. Let's just call it like it is. But the reality of it is you've got to have this working capital to get it going, right? So, and that's where the rubber meets the road, because if we're going to bring somebody young in, they've got, it's going to take 1 year, maybe 2 years to get to that, multiple, between $50,000 to $100,000 worth of income.
I mean, tell what most realtors make.
Most realtors make, now, we'll debate this number because you guys are super smart, but average is like in the 40s nationwide. 40,000.
Like lower than teachers.
Yeah.
Most realtors nationwide.
Interesting. I wonder if it's almost like a tournament game. In other words, you're making a low amount, and then when you hit top dog, you're not making
Well, friend of the program, Tommy Brannick, said 15% of the realtors do 90% of the business.
That is a
I
tournament
would
game.
venture to say that's closer to 10%.
Yeah.
So that's another
Yeah.
answer
So
to the
let's
question.
get Dad to jump
Yeah,
in here.
no, what I was going to say, I mean, that tells you a lot about this particular business, which is a little bit what Nikki said before, right? In the fact that you have a lot of people that do this on the side, right? Where it's like, okay, my husband is working or my wife is working, I don't need to work, but, I want to do something on the side. I want to sit home, every single day. And therefore, I dabble in it. And we know people that do 2 jobs. They do one, and then on the weekend, I like to dabble in real estate. So of course, you're going to have that. I mean, that's going to skew the averages of those that want to do this full time.
On top of that, Xavier, almost half don't do 1 transaction or less. So that really skews the numbers.
Absolutely, there you are, yeah.
Of dressing. And we talked about this yesterday, and on next Monday, I'm going to bring some stats in about, agents making a certain amount of money and up and what that actual number is. But, I generally, Yona and I generally want to try to recruit. And what can we do? And I hit this brick wall on, I just don't know what to do.
There's going to be a brokerage, and this should be Yes Realty Partners' mission. There's going to be a brokerage that focuses on the Latino community and gets Latino agents.
Well, that's the reason I'm having this
I
conversation.
get it, because this is what Johnny Ornella says. So multiple comments from Johnny that are applicable right now. There's more to selling a home to the Latino market. Latinos have the income nut. They are cash rich, but most don't have the back history for loan approval. He also says this: with Latinos to have the opportunity to get into real estate, we need the knowledge, the support, and education on how it works. The biggest issue is trust for us. You have to be a part of the Latino community, not just be a Latino. There's a lot of understanding on how our minds work and how the older Latino generations understands things. You got to be a part of the community. Xavier, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, no, he's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things about the Latino community, right, is that they're very family oriented. I mean, family comes first, right? And you see that all the time. They as soon as work is over, they're with their family, right? And so everybody that they trust is family first, then friends, and then everybody else. So it takes a very long time really to crack that nut, right? And it's not as simple as saying, hello, how are you? I'm so-and-so, and you see them twice, and now I'm ready to do business, right? That is, the American way works that way, but the Latino work doesn't, right? You almost have to feel like you're part of their family before they say, okay, I trust this guy, and therefore now I can do business with him, whatever that business may be. So he's right, but on the education part, that's exactly right. In other words, how many, like everything else, I think in every particular service, financial service, real estate service, there is a time lag between you really become good at what you do. You have to learn it, you have to understand it, you have to become good at it, right? And again, that's time. It just doesn't happen overnight. You can put somebody in front of the license, say, here you go, I'm going to pay for this and I'm going to subsidize you for a year. It still takes time.
Well, let's talk about numbers. This is business. Let's talk business here, right? So, look, we can help finance the license. We meaning Yes Realty Partners and most other real estate firms, we will do the education. We will provide the apprenticeship. The problem is how we're going to provide the salary for a year. That's the problem.
And I do wonder if you're losing some of the the go-getters that will be into this business to insurance, to banking, because I know insurance, as an example, provides. If you get picked as like an agent for one of the big insurance houses, they're providing salary for the first couple of years.
So what does this business model look like?
I think what you have to do, this is one man's spitballing with you, is you have to create almost like this admin intern's a bad word, admin position where someone in that first year to 24 months is getting paid a salary that they can count on for doing paperwork, for doing administrative stuff in the office, and then that leads to them maybe getting a book of business that they can count on. So if it's just sales commissions, you're going to have a hard time doing that.
No. So you would take out the admin end of it because we provide that because you want to learn the business of the admin end of it is the easy part of it. Frankly, the hard part of it is the nuances of the business. And literally, that's what we're talking about. We're trying to figure out a way to do this because Jerry's spot on. Whichever brokerage figures this out first is
always going to make a
gold mine. Barbara Lee, hello and welcome to the show. He's going to have a gold mine. Jump in here.
I got two thoughts. One, you've got some demographics here that also are interesting because you've got a higher number of females in the car association than males. that Latinas, which the reason we had the roundtable last week was because Latinas are more likely to start businesses than Latinos or any other group in the country.
So females would start.
I would say you would start with females for
Okay,
two,
great.
and what you would target is, again, we were talking about second income Latinas. So women that are hitting, Latina women that are hitting sort of that age where sort of like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, their children are grown up enough that they don't need to be at home all the time, but they want to start doing something and provide second income. You can hit that demographic. I mean, the thing is you need to hit them before another industry hits them. So like they're willing to start businesses, they're willing to work, they're very social, and they're obviously, you already have women that are attracted to this industry. So that's a key, that's a key demographic right there. But you also, like, how do you take care of the salary problem? Well, they have another partner or spouse that is working on that is taking care of it.
Yona's listening, and she just texted me, my job as recruiter just got lost because apparently I'm going to be recruiting females in the 30s. Thanks, Nick.
You could, come on, you can still do it.
I just totally lost the job. Thanks,
Okay,
buddy.
well, you're welcome. Now you saved you some work, is what I did.
And you assume I work. So,
You do work.
yeah,
That's
no. So look, you brought this up, this
Right.
numbers, right? What we sent out. You guys are numbers people, right? What did the car numbers tell you? What did the stats tell you guys?
It's what I was seeing from the stats is just I'm sort of
Be
echoing
honest.
my dad
Yeah,
here.
no.
Is what you're seeing there is a transition, and I think sometimes we want to rush the transition because we see the future, right? We can see that Latinos are becoming the biggest homebuyer group, and we sit there and say, well, how do we boost this number now? But my suspicion, and I could be wrong about this, that's why I was kind of asking the recruitment question, is I know a lot of times in finance, right, some of your recruitment is clients. In other words, someone who had a lot of money that you were managing, and you're like, he's really good with people, would you like to be an asset gatherer? So my suspicion is that your group of Latinos, out of which you are pulling future agents, is that 70% that are going to be homeowners. There's going to be go-getters in that homeowner group that know what they're doing, that are really charismatic, and that pull out. But what happens is they're not going to be reflected in this yet because this is an emerging trend. It's not a current trend. And I think for me, the age is what tells the story, because if you skew older on age, you skew white on race. Because
Well said.
the white race in America tends to skew older than Latino and then African American. I think Latino is the youngest of the three.
So thank you for bringing up African American, because we have the same problem with African American.
Exactly. So in terms of the average age, I think Latino is the youngest, then African American, then white. So if you skew older on age, you are going to skew whiter. As my suspicion is, as these things change and you go now, obviously the oldest group retires and the trends change, you just have to be ready with the infrastructure to bring these people in when they show up. Because like I'm saying, when 70% of Latinos are going to be homebuyers, there's going to be a lot of those that are going to sit there and say, I now have an interest in this business. The question is, am I now able to go through that pipeline smoothly to enter the business, or do I get pilched by a different business?
Or, God forbid, the market takes a downturn. Right?
In which case you don't want to be in
nothing that anybody's reading saying is that, and I think you guys would echo that.
No, we don't see that.
Don't see it happening.
From your perspective on that end of it, but 38% of all the buyers last year, the last 12 months, were your age and under, millennials and under. So not only is it, and I agree 100%, not only is it, we've got to figure out.
This guy's about to get married over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, good realtor. Yona. But the age and really, I'm personally, and Yona and I, and I think CAR as a whole, I think I can speak for the whole board, and because we, in our strategic plan, we're trying to figure out how we can attract younger, how we can attract folks that don't look, frankly, like me, right? And I'm just stunned that we're not doing it, and stumped on how to do it.
But I think you're missing something here. First of all, what Nicholas mentioned before, I think is spot on. In other words, if you focus on the Latina that is, between 30 and 50, right? I think you're going to be able to capture an enormous amount of people that are interested. But second of all, if I'm buying a house, obviously I'm older now, but if I'm young and I'm buying a house, I don't necessarily am looking for somebody that's young to sell me a house. I'm looking for somebody that's experienced. I want somebody that I know knows everything there is with regard to home selling or home buying that I don't have to worry about, as opposed to somebody young. It's like, well, has he been around the block enough, right? Does he know everything? Or he or she, right? So I don't think that is as critical, right, as the knowledge that you bring to the table, the charisma you bring to a table. And let's face it, I mean, there's also charisma, how well your relationship was with people. That's important. If you come out as a hard ass, it's like, I'm not going to go with this guy, I'm going to go with somebody else.
Well, again, I'll give a shout out to Michael Guthrie yesterday. I'll do it again today. There's 3 things he taught us some years ago: be professional, be caring, and be trustworthy, right? But I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because I think it's a matter of how this apprenticeship process goes, right? So if we're showing up to buy, and we have a young Latino, a Latina, I think I do that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
You got it.
Good job.
Perfect.
Resident Latino.
I'm working on it. I'm going to be with them, right? So, the trusted advisor, right? Is going to be there to help us. So you as a buyer or a seller knows that there's support to help us. So I think that's an easy workaround, right? But getting that person that's willing to go through the process, willing to go through the training, willing to say, look, we'll help you a little bit, but you're going to have to absorb this for a period of time. That's the struggle that they get past, from my perspective.
But bouncing off my dad's idea, you roll down from there, because who's more likely to recruit younger Latinos? An older white person or an older Latina person?
Olga Morris.
Olga Morris,
yeah.
right? So I mean,
She would crush it.
if Olga were here recruiting people, she could totally take the Latin community completely by storm and have people recruited in. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like,
Aim at the
There we go.
Don't stop talking.
There we go.
Don't stop talking.
That's great right there.
There we go.
So I guess that's my point, is that you have to, again, it's like Alex said, Rome wasn't built in a day, in the sense of you can't just, he didn't say that, but he.
That's what he alluded to.
He alluded to.
We were
always Rome.
We had
How long did we go
we had a
before Rome?
side bet that it would take within 45 minutes or less before you mentioned Rome.
Really? You did? You had a bet? Oh, okay, well, Rome, here we go. So Rome wasn't built in the day. You might have to start with an older demographic so that you can roll younger.
Sure.
I mean, the question is, are you trying to penetrate the age, or are you trying to penetrate the demographic, or are you trying to go for both at the same time? If you're going for both at the same time, it's going to be difficult, because apparently you're not even attracting a lot of, like, whites that are younger.
No.
It's then the age is a problem as well. And so if you're really going if you have to pick and choose your battles, you might have to do them separately and then work on it over time.
Yeah, and knowing that we weren't going to come up with a magic silver bullet, we're probably going to do a silver buckshot on this one. I just wanted to start the conversation. We sit down regularly, but we don't really sit down. And I figured, what the hell, we'll do this in front of a microphone and have the conversation. But look, any help from the feed. We really want to do this. It's in our heart and our soul to do this, but I just don't know how. And
you get an Olga Morris.
Yeah.
You offer her points on the package, and you bring her into YRP and say your gig is recruitment for YRP.
So when you guys, I do need to give a shout out to Olga. When you guys had her on, I was literally in tears. I knew Don for decades, her husband, and in the business. Unbelievable in the business, and he's missed every day. I miss him. Thank you.
Alex, jump in
Fantastic. He was an incredible man. No, I was thinking on the subject of your persistence is also going to lead to your reward. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a long time frame where you're making these invitations, you're saying, join the board. Think about becoming a realtor. No, I'm not ready, can't do it. But over time, as this demographic, as the age shifts, as the older ones retire and new people come in, you are going to start seeing the fruits of it. That's what I always, when people, because I've actually been asked, way back with Forward Adelante, I would often be asked by Rotary clubs, how do we get Latino members? And I would always harken back from the Hispanic community to, if you think about the Italian community 2 generations ago, because I'm also half Italian, right? The first generation of Italians,
Sicilian.
my nonna, they didn't go around and mingle with the non-Italian community. They stayed in the Italian community. The next generation.
But Alex, I'm going to interrupt you. That's not exclusive to Italian. I'm half Irish.
No,
I'm
same
the
thing.
Irish
Exactly.
community did the same.
Exactly. All the previous waves of immigration, right? They stayed with that. The second generation, well, now they're interacting more.
Yeah.
The third one, you can't even tell.
You can't even identify with race, really.
Exactly.
You do, but you
they
don't.
do, but they
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
right? So
Well said.
what I'm saying is, as we go into that phase, as long as you're doing the work of being persistent and making sure, as you're doing right now, that Latinos out there know, okay, I want to bring you in. It may take, you may sit here and not see in the time at which you're working at Yes Realty the fruits of that. You may be 10 years from now and it's just starting to happen, but you have to lay the seeds really
Well,
early.
if this data is right, 70% in the next 20 years, so we better get moving fast.
Yeah.
Oh, Johnny says the younger Latinos lose the Spanish-speaking ability to communicate with the older buyers, especially complicated language like buying a home.
Sure.
And he says, let's be honest, the younger Latinos, they need to have the language skills to simplify a complicated process.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Very true.
So to go back to your generational thing, I'm third generation on my mother's side, right? So my grandfather was from Italy, from Bari.
Right.
My mother was first generation, I'm second generation on my Italian side. My Irish side, we go back to the 1700s.
Nice. Wow. That's cool.
So and that's what it is. And it's,
But yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like going back to Rome. Lots of migration patterns. What happens is
Should I
that
tell the joke?
you start with a mobile. Okay, what's the joke?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you look at migration patterns overall, most of history, and I'm thinking Rome because that was my specialty, but like, again, most migration patterns, you have a very mobile society, moves because they're immigrating somewhere.
Sure.
They stay a little bit more mobile at first, right? They're not really 100% settled, and then they start grabbing roots and growing roots. I'm sorry, not grabbing roots. They start growing roots, and then you have what we're seeing now, where now all of a sudden you have all these Latinos and next generation that are moving from renting to buying and buying homes and now buying bigger homes. So we're seeing a transition. I mean, part of the problem is that we're in a transition period where this is happening. People are moving. Like people were immigrating to the United States. You had large swaths of immigration, and now you're seeing the effects of that, which is that people are now starting to think about buying homes rather than renting places.
So I want to give a shout out to Johnny. Thank you, Johnny, for participating in this conversation. It's just first-class people, first-class family.
Absolutely.
On that end of it. And, I just wanted to start today's show off with this conversation because we're really trying to figure it out. Yes, Realty Partners is getting to the point where we're starting our second year. We're moving in the right direction. We really want to figure out a way to tackle it.
Maybe you just have to change the name from just to C Realty, and there you are. S-I, not
So
S-E-A.
Mrs. Smith might have a trouble with that because that's her initials, but just saying.
And his daughter's initials.
And my daughter's initials, just saying.
A subsidiary of yes.
I'm getting fired twice here, but
What's the advice you would give him to get more Latino agents in YRP? How old are you?
old enough.
How does
Nearly, let's say a
How
heart.
does a 36-year-old?
A 30.
How does a
You just
50
recovered.
plus year old white guy get Latinos into the brokerage?
Well, obviously it's a challenge, and I'm not saying it isn't, but like Alex and Nicholas have mentioned before, right? It's a process. The important thing is you have to be the first one there. You have to be the first one that says, okay, we're open for business for Latinos, and here's everything we'd like to do for you, right? We're working with you. We're going to subsidize your licenses, whatever it may be. We're going to educate you, right? And then, of course, the hope is that the Latinos you begin to get into your business of people that say, yes, either my wife or my husband is working, I don't need the money right now, but I'd like to have it, right, in the future, or I can basically at this point do this part-time and learn so that maybe someday I can do this full-time. So the important thing is making sure that everybody here in Charlottesville in the community knows that you're doing this, and this is a perfect, obviously, a great way to do
So
it.
that's why we're doing this on this
Exactly.
network. That's why we're reaching out. We are actually in the middle of writing our 2022 business plan in the next 5 years, and this is forefront in our business plan. So this is why I wanted to have this conversation.
Second question for you: Do you think utilizing Latino ambassador on the team to recruit would be beneficial? would that be a good utilization of
absolutely,
funds?
Yes.
Company
I would
funds?
imagine so.
I agree.
Absolutely,
Yes,
100%.
You want that evangelist on your team. Also, I mean, do
He
you
assumes we have funds.
Do you have
Just kidding.
a good like client base of Latinos that you have worked with on the client side?
You
'Cause
know-
that's always a potential pool of recruitment.
I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I can tell you,
You've helped Johnny.
I helped Johnny,
Yeah.
but it's on one hand, right? It's just not a lot, but we know this is coming, and we're trying. Look, this is trying to be altruistic, doing the right thing. Plus, it's also business, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not. We're seeing
No,
the
I'm
tea
just in
leaves.
the sense of not just business wise. In other words, sometimes your client base is your recruitment
Sure.
base as well.
Yeah.
So as that grows, as this 70% starts hitting the market, at the beginning you may have to capture them, right? Think about it. Right now, given the disparity between the number of Latinos that are buying and the number of real estate agents out there that are Latino, there are going to be non-Latino real estate agents selling homes to Latinos.
So,
That's a potential connection there that you then to see if is this person I'm selling to someone who does have that go-getter attitude.
I would just say you got to promise money. I
sorry,
said
I-
money. I mean,
You gotta promise
well,
money.
in the sense of like you gotta make it seem like you're gonna make money. I mean, if you come on the air and you say, well, we don't make that much, the Latino that might be interested in watching is gonna be like, well, then I'm gonna go work for the insurance guy because he's driving a BMW down my street up and down every day. So my point is like, if you want go-getters, you got to be like, how do we make this business successful? Like, yes, we are a successful business. You will make money by entering this industry.
But we debunked that a little bit by the math, right?
Right.
Because, once you start taking out that, and if you take a look at the stats, a huge percentage drop out in the first year, right?
Okay.
They go through just general real estate agents.
But that doesn't speak to why you would want to do it, though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
That works
So
against it.
you got to
agree.
do the opposite. You got to be like, okay, we're taking out the people that drop out in the first year because they don't have the
hustle.
spirit. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say Elan, but hustle's better.
So I'm gonna-
Elan is French, but if you just take out the people
you
that
just
have
trying to, like,
stuck
impress
it.
me or
No,
something?
it was a military.
This is how he
history
always
thing.
is.
It's like the
You
moral
should see his
fortitude.
comments to
like-
us on the show.
Hold it. I understand French. I understand German. Just don't speak it.
Okay,
Be careful.
gotcha. All right, so moral fortitude would probably be a better, or the courage to stick through it. If you take out the metrics that you don't like the people that fall out in 1 year, the people that aren't doing any transactions but they have the license, if you can isolate and be like, well, listen, if you stick to it, you're going to make money, you're going to have a successful business, you'll be able to provide for your family and retire well. and have a
So
lot of
I will make a 10-year bet with everybody here.
Okay.
Right? The Latina folks that come into this market, that make that decision to come in this business,
Right.
will not be the ones that drop out in 1 year.
Oh, no.
No,
Because
They have a larger buyer pool to work with.
no. Go ahead, say it for me.
Well, no, what I
Go
was saying,
ahead,
the
say it
statistic
for
that
me.
you gave before, right? The growth of this market is going to be Latino.
Yeah, and
You
they
wanna be-
identify with the buyers.
Yeah, you want to be the first one on the boat.
I would say Latinos are tough.
That's.
I know where you're going with it.
That's
What-
where
what did
I
you
didn't
say?
mean. I didn't want to be
Latinos are
the
tough.
Oh, tough.
Yeah.
right? So I'm a recovering developer and builder. I've loved hiring Latinx, Latino contractors. They were always the first ones on the job,
Oh, yeah.
always the last one to leave, never complained, always got the work done. So if we call it work ethic, is that what we're going to call it?
We could call it work ethic.
If you bring that work ethic to the table, you will be successful. So that's the counter argument to it. Not that other folks do it for different reasons and
Right.
all this stuff. I'm not judging anybody, but if you really want, I tell people all the time, if you want to get in this business, it's 110% business. 7 days a week, even part-time, it's 7 days a week.
Right.
And if you put 110% in it, you can make six figures.
This is what I would do if I were you.
That's the sell.
I would get
That's the sell
a
right
Latino ambassador in this community as a recruitment epicenter or point of contact. I would utilize the Johnny Ornalis family as evangelists for YRP and what you guys have done. I would create a compensation package for the first 24 months that shows you're not going to have zero revenue coming in because you haven't locked any sales. And then I would stay completely out of the way of what you just built and let them go.
Yeah. and seriously, this is why we're having this conversation, because we're building a business plan.
Yeah, building ideas.
Building the business plan.
What are you thinking over there, Alex Irby? I see the
No,
wheels turning.
No, I like it. I like that notion, and I think the other key that I would mention is, yes, it's true. I'm not disputing, obviously, the number that a lot might fail in the first year, but that's also true of most small businesses.
Absolutely.
Most people don't realize that most small businesses fail within the first 5 years. However, people start more than one. They get back up again.
Sure.
And Latinos in particular start businesses at 3 times the rate of native-born Americans. So what that's telling you is you have a population that is not afraid of risk. So that won't stare off. When phrased as you just put it, the possibility of success, the opportunity that's out there, the fact that, you could fail in the first year isn't really going to stare off, because Latinos are starting businesses at such incredible rates, they're going to sit there and say, I know that.
Yeah, so we can prove the numbers, right? That's an easy thing to
Yeah.
do. To prove the numbers, if you do so much work and so much effort, this is what you get. That's a simple example to do.
Exactly.
But I do kind of want to pivot a little bit, unless
Let's
the
do it.
feed has
Let's
got
do it.
questions
Yeah,
on this.
well, there's a couple
Oh.
questions coming in here. So this is from Brian Sherling. He says, can the Irpies put in perspective how cash-rich, Jerry's term, the Latino marketplace is?
How cash rich those,
Yeah.
So here's a good little stat that we had from our Latino roundtable, and this is Latinas alone. This is just the female decision makers, as we talked about a lot of times Latinos are the decision makers in terms of home economy, right? Latinas.
I think on everything, but that's
on
okay.
probably on everything. Latinas influence $2 trillion in
yeah.
purchasing power,
Yeah.
which would make them the 8th largest economy in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the amount of that is.
But that's
influenced.
Latinas in this
And that's
country.
Latinas in this country.
Just to
Sure.
clarify, not to.
That's Latinas in the United States.
I knew it wasn't center.
Just-
And so, and let's face it, Latinos also, we tend to be cash rich, right?
Yeah.
And my father speak this as well, because there are many countries in Latin America where we come from where the
Distrust.
banking system
Exactly.
Yeah.
is
That's
not
Yeah.
trustworthy.
Yeah.
So your first inclination is, I will save and I will keep this in cash.
Like hoarding cash.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
as in
Yeah.
cash, as in
Yeah.
Yeah,
physical
I was gonna
dollars.
say, we have more stats on that, because 45% of Latinas have a savings account. 50% of Latinas have or plan to create college savings accounts for their children. So like there is this strong drive to save in the Latin community.
Which translates to home ownership rather
Yes.
than renting.
And how they save is by multi-generational homes, right? They typically live together for
There's family connection.
family
'cause
connection.
It's not an issue of
That's just part of the culture
it's
too.
part
Yeah.
of the culture as well.
Yeah.
50
But it's true.
Well,
I mean,
I was gonna say, we got more on the home ownership. 52% of Latinas, 50 plus, own their own home, and 44% between 35 and 49 intend to purchase a home within the next 3 years.
That's a huge stat.
That's a huge stat, because again, we're talking about the purchasing
get
power.
that?
Did you get all
Did
that?
you write that down?
I got it. I'm going to back it up with.
Oh, you got
different.
different
We got
stats.
even more stats. We got a book of stats.
He's got a Bible.
You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, I was like,
I'm excited.
That's a
But,
lot of
I won't-
paper.
I won't bore anybody by going through my 120 pages there. But it's interesting, the largest, they didn't break it down by race, but the largest buyer profile are women
right?
over the age of 40.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Stability.
And also, I think the home economy. There's still, I think, regardless of where women entering the workforce over the last 50 years and then really reaching that point, the home economy, I think, culturally and historically, is run by the woman of the household. So that's where a lot of the purchasing power comes from. There's still
Well, I
masters
remember
of the
my
home economy.
grandmother, who was from Italy, would say, the man may be the head of the family, but the neck turns the head, and the woman is the
Yes,
neck.
my mom has said the same thing.
It's very true.
The
It's
net
very
turns
true.
the head.
Keith Smith, you said you wanted to go down the road of inflation.
I do. I got all kinds of stuff on inflation here, and you guys getting a little too excited about inflation. Except for Dad. Dad's like,
Dad.
oh boy,
Dad,
I've seen
seen
this through
before.
inflation.
You've seen this movie before.
I'm not really that, all that excited.
The new division of your real estate
Like
company
anybody is.
should be CSIP Weather Realty.
Excuse
Yes,
me.
you can real estate.
Wow.
Oh,
Good.
really?
She said, well, very good.
My hearing aid didn't pick that up.
CSIP Weather Realty. I said
Yes, you
weather.
can.
Yes,
She
you
said,
And
what?
who
Yeah.
suggested
Yes,
that?
you can real estate. Johnny,
Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah,
that should be the
Johnny.
new division of YRP.
Oh, yeah.
Headed up by Johnny Orales.
I mean, he would certainly be an evangelist.
Sure.
Of Philadelphia.
So how is inflation going to affect the housing market?
I think we should start with this gentleman.
Oh,
right
Did I just bring the whole mood down?
No, look how happy he is. He was talking about.
No. You know, if you go back in history, right, and certainly there's been times where inflation has been very high, and so the issue I have with the inflation that we're seeing today is that it feels like it's an inflation that's being manufactured. In other words, it doesn't feel like a real inflation.
that.
Meaning that.
Media manufacturer?
No, meaning manufacturing,
It's
meaning that
external. It's
it's
not
that it's
because of the
external.
market.
It's in other words, you know, inflation usually comes because things are going so well, right? That the demand truly is outpacing the demand, and you got full employment, right? Here we have a situation where I just don't feel that that's the case, right? We just don't have the economy booming the way we had the economy booming, you know, maybe like 3-4 years ago, right? And yet we're seeing this enormous inflation in our system, right? I mean, even today, I mean, we saw the PPP, you know, the PPI came out, the Producer Price Index, and year over year it's 8.6%. And I mean, that's outrageous,
crazy number.
right? And that even hasn't filtered down to the Consumer Price Index, which is obviously at this point running about 6%. But those numbers are outrageous, right? I mean, we're not used to living with those type of numbers. So what is happening? What's happening is that, you know, there are, and we see that all the time now, right? There are the supply issue, the supply chain issue is really causing a lot of this inflation. So the issue that we have is this going to continue? Is this type of inflation going to continue for the next 2, 3, 4 years? Or are we going to see this inflation eventually disappear? That's what we really don't know. So how does that impact real estate, right? I mean, if you own a home, you're probably sitting there going, okay, I'm leveraged here, right? So if my house goes up 10% and I put $20,000 down and the house was $300,000, right? If the market went up 10%, I just made $30,000 on a $60,000 investment. I'm up 50% on what money I put up, so I'm pretty happy, right?
And then if you've got it at a 3% interest, right, that kind of fights against inflation too, the mortgage rate.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is when you think about the 1970s, we had inflation of, you know, 12, 13, 14%.
Would you like to know exactly?
Oh, yeah, what's the exact?
I think it was 14%, wasn't it, at the height?
74 was 12.3%.
Okay. So,
Unemployment was 7.2%.
yeah, so I mean, and think about it. That's just, that unemployment wasn't horrendous, right? And the point is, inflation got there, right? And of course, we also had the oil issue back then. But interest rates were raised dramatically then to like, you know, 14, 15, 16% in order to fight that inflation. You're trying to buy a house with a 14, 15% interest rate on your mortgage. Kiss it goodbye. You just cannot afford that. Sure. I mean, you know, who's buying a house at that point in time? I mean, I can only remember one person. I think it was me and my wife. And it's like
that would be
two.
two.
All right, two. I mean, that was two. We were the real estate.
I think I beat you.
And his was 18%.
I beat you a little bit.
I mean, that's like buying a house with a MasterCard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're here today with interest rates at extremely low levels. I mean, I think the 30-year mortgage, what is it, 3%, 3.25%?
Yeah, it's 3.25%, 3.5%. You know,
Okay.
we're gonna
That's
bring
on your
some
credit.
folks
Yeah.
on Friday to kind of talk a little bit about that
Okay.
too.
And rates have come down. The 10 years come down about, you know, 40 basis points in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that's going to help mortgage rates again. So inflation has an impact on housing, right? And it's going to have a greater impact on creating homes, on building homes, than it does for people that are, you know, literally kind of flipping houses, et cetera.
So we talked about this yesterday. There's nationwide, between 300 and 400,000 jobs short in the construction business per month. So they're short. I think the material end of stuff will make a much quicker recovery as far as that, you know, shortage goes. But how do you make up skilled labor?
Yeah.
300 to 400,000 to do that. But the reason I wanted to tag this a little bit, and I did a little research, historically, normally, right, what's the bell curve? What's the curve called?
The Phillips Curve? Or-
That's Phillips Curve.
Yeah. Phillips Curve.
That goes inflation
and unemployment.
Unemployment,
Phillips
right?
curve.
So let's explain that for a second, what that is, if you
So
don't
the
mind.
Phillips Curve, economically speaking, they discovered the Phillips Curve.
Okay, you're done.
No, the reason I say why they discovered it in the 40s
That's exactly right.
after the Great Depression, right? That basically inflation and unemployment they move opposite one another, right? So as inflation goes up, you see unemployment go down. When unemployment's higher, inflation is typically lower. The issue is there is a strong economic argument to be made that since the 70s, the Phillips Curve is broken. In other words, the attempt to manipulate the Phillips Curve to the Federal Reserve would start pushing up interest rates to try to lower unemployment.
So the last time that these were inverted was between 1980 and 1981. It was in 1980, it was 12%. 12.5% in inflation, unemployment was 7.2. Just imagine unemployment now at 7.2. And then it was almost on par in 81. It was 8.9 versus 8.5.
So that's the issue, right? The problem is a lot of the economic levers still operate under the assumption that the Phillips Curve is still operational, that it still
but there's a third component to this conversation, right? Right? Housing supply has not been this bad since after the war, World War II.
Right.
So you've got unemployment that's low, inflation that's high, well, climbing anyway, and then and a crisis of inventory that we haven't seen since the late 40s and the early 50s.
And I would add one thing on top of that. You also have a Federal Reserve in this case that their typical lever to combat inflation, which would be raising interest rates, I think is not a lever they wish they are going to use anytime soon.
I mean, what do you think, Dad? Are they going to pull that lever?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, they're not going to pull that lever. So that changes your calculus.
So the reason I wanted to talk about this, we have not seen this triple threat or setup since the 50s.
And there's also it's a quadruple threat because Charlottesville and Albemarle County are coveted areas to live because of the University of Virginia. So you add that dynamic as well.
Yeah,
and that's a supply-demand, right? In other words, if there's no other place to build in Charlottesville, right, then whatever's here has to just continue to go up.
How many units are we short, Mr. Miller?
5 million plus nationally. And I would bet that's even more from a Central Virginia standpoint because only 5% of Albemarle County's comprehensive plan allows housing growth and commercial growth and development. So 5% of all of Albemarle County you can build upon. Think about that. And of that 5%, not all the land is set up for construction. That's commercial and residential.
Right.
Wow.
That's terrifying. This is a governmental problem in a lot of ways that's been created.
Almost all of the problems are governmental problems.
Yes.
Like the Federal Reserve.
That's why I'm a libertarian.
Well, that's the whole point. Like you've heard of like the old game theory things where like two people having a conversation and then you stick a security camera in the room, the conversation will change. It's because it's game theory. You're gonna operate different when there's another player. If the Federal Reserve becomes an active player rather than a player that should have been like the lender of last resort as it was intended and all this stuff, and they're starting to try to manipulate inflation to have better unemployment rates, well, that changes the market and then everyone else is aware of what they're doing. It's sort of like whenever they meet, the stock market goes up, or whenever they lower rates, the stock market goes, because they know that they're going to pump the stock market full of money. So it's one of these things that, what are you thinking? Because you give me the face.
No, I'm
Give me the face.
Yeah, he's got this look. He's got this, no, there's a look that he wants to respond.
Jump in.
I'm just saying that they don't pump money into the stock market. They pump money into the system, and what happens is people sitting around saying, what do I do with this money? And they put it into the stock market.
Which is not what they're intending.
They can buy a house.
Yeah. They can buy a house.
And they're doing that now, right? So the problem is the supply is just as an... Now, so my question was going to be also with you was, Keith, one of the things that I saw was the fact that millennials took a little longer to go into the purchasing homes, right, than our generation. Sure. And so my question is, was it the pandemic that all of a sudden you had this pandemic and people said, okay, I now need to work at a house. This idea of renting just doesn't fit me and therefore I need to buy a house. And all that age group, right, the ones that wanted to buy a house and have children, the ones that want to get out of renting, went into the market at the same time. And we had an economy that had been shut down, and catching up to that is troublesome.
So if I was allowed to go through this...
Well said. Dude, I'm giving you props for that, man. That was well said. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, if you will go through this several hundred pages here, double-sided, by the way, this trend that you just outlined has been happening pre-pandemic, right? And part of that is the hangover from the time of great unpleasantness.
Okay.
And what millennials have done, and I know this because both my daughters are millennials, they've lived through this, and they're waiting a little bit longer to get into the housing market. They're waiting a little bit longer to get married. They're waiting a little bit longer to have children. And they're also bringing more cash to the table. The millennial is saving more cash than what we did, right? Because at least on my generation, we didn't save as much cash when we were in our 20s and our 30s.
Well, we didn't have the extra time to save either.
We also didn't have the extra capital to save.
Why didn't you have the extra time? Because you started families right away?
No, I'm just saying is if people are getting married now in their early 30s and you got married in their early 20s, well, you didn't have time to save, because you're right. I mean, once you get married, pretty much children come right thereafter.
Yeah, Jerry's spot on. At least in my family, in my came out of the Marine Corps, got married, had a child, and started working. And then as Jerry will tell you, 3-year-olds, 4-years-olds are expensive.
Yeah, and they take up a lot of your time.
Yeah, well, and that's a beautiful thing. But
some of the time.
I know Mrs. Miller is watching. I was trying to throw you a softball.
I love my son most of the time.
Most of the time.
You can relate to that.
No, but I think to your point, just what they find in behavioral economics is that people, let's face it, we are conditioned in many ways. Our outlook on the way things work financially is conditioned by sort of our first major experience of the markets. Right. And for the millennial generation, the first major experience is a housing crisis.
Yeah,
sure.
And a complete collapse of the economy. That's your first major thing, is recession precipitated by a housing crisis.
So when we have conversations with folks in their 30s, early 30s, we always have that conversation always comes up. And then we have to spend some time explaining to them, this is not 2008. We do this on the show all the time. This is not 2006. Exactly. This is not 2007. That doesn't mean something down the line that we don't know about is going to happen. But we know statistically, you guys are numbers guys, right? Statistically, 3 to 5, 3 to 6% year over year is what your appreciation is going to be if you stay in it long enough.
Exactly.
Just like the market, right?
It's the long term that you have to really focus on, because when you look at the short term, of course, you're going to be frightened off by a 30% drop, a 50% drop. But the key is you need to look at the long term period in the history showing that in most years, historically, the stock market is not down. Just like in most years, real estate does not decline in value. Over the long term, these things increase in value. But it's hard when you're a generation whose first encounter. Think about it, if you were born, so I was born 92. You don't start thinking about personal finance, at least until you're approaching high school.
Knowing you probably was around 94, 95.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I was a little early.
Let's face it.
At age 7, I was thinking of math and stuff. But typically, you start in high school. So
you're walking around with a calculator figured out.
My dad had my brother and I picking stocks, and he said, here's $100 each. You guys pick the stocks. If it grows, we'll fund it more. If it doesn't, you lose some of that money.
Good for
and
you.
when we were kids, we were picking... like 7, 8, 9, 10. We were in the paper. Remember when it was
in the paper,
and you can literally find
right. No, exactly. Yes. Yeah. The Wall Street Journal had
all
the
$100. You can pick some stocks. Let's go. Yeah. And then he created his own. I think it was like the Dad Index. It was great.
But I mean, most
what a
people
life
don't
experience,
do that.
man.
That's
We
great.
did that in 4th grade. Remember?
We did that.
You guys did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He came to our elementary school. That was his little. Like when the dad came in, like when the parents would come in, there was a little investing project with stocks and bonds.
That's awesome.
That you could pitch between. But for most
You're right.
millennials, right? If your first encounter with the market is age, let's say 16.
Sure.
Born 92, that's 2008.
Yeah.
So the first time you start focusing on, there's a thing called the stock market, there's a housing market, is because it's collapsing.
I mean, my daughter's 27 and 35. They lived through this, right? I tell the story all the time. My first daughter, we were able to buy her a very nice car when she was age to drive. When my second daughter, she got a used car from a client who couldn't pay us.
And was it purple?
No, it was a green 1997 green Ford Escort, and unfortunately there was a death in the family. They couldn't pay the funeral bills or whatever it was, and we made an arrangement to get the car, and my poor daughter would, the car had a certain odor in it that just never went away. And the funny thing is I made a promise to her that if she would graduate school, I'd buy her, get a master's degree, I'd buy her a new car. And sure as hell, as soon as we walked out of JMU line, she grabbed my hand and we went to the to buy me a car. Damn.
Do you remember?
Damn.
I always remember.
So let's get back to inflation, right? Okay. Look. Here's the reality of it. We're looking at macro and micro and all this stuff. But every day, I just filled up my truck. Jerry just posted an awesome thing about the cost of
turkey.
Yeah.
Cost of turkey.
2x, yeah.
Yeah, and this is real. This is hitting people in their real pocketbook. This has to have an influence on the overall market.
This is, it's without any doubt, it's very sad what's going on, because what we don't realize is that inflation is an enormous tax on people's income, right? Because you earn money and then you go out and shop. And the problem is that the people that can least afford a tax increase, right,
That's
is
exactly
the
right.
middle class, the lower income people, right? And you go out there and food is not only up 5-6%, it's up 14, 15, 16%.
CPI
Exactly.
is such
Yeah.
I don't want to say bogus number, but it
Well,
is a
we'll
number that
explain
is.
what a CPI
so
is.
CPI is Consumer Price Index, and that's your typical. When you see on the news, inflation has increased 5%. Right? The number they're giving you is CPI, Consumer Price Index. The problem is that thing is an average of all the goods and services in the country, and it is not just seasonally adjusted, it is also adjusted for quality. In other words, if a new car is double the price of the car a year ago, but the new car has a lot more gadgets and it has a computer interface connected with it, they adjust CPI and say, well, it's not really twice as expensive because there's a product improvement, so it's really only a third as expensive. So CPI is then adjusted down. So CPI,
A better one would be groceries and fuel.
it was groceries and fuel.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah.
when you go into the store to buy your food, inflation is going to be higher. The inflation you see is going to be higher than the number you see.
Gas
on
is
the
up
news.
42%. Food is up 4.6%.
I would say food is probably higher than 4.6%.
I mean,
I think that's low.
this is as of
just to-
September.
Yeah, just to give you an example, right? So like I said, the producer price index came out today, right? So it was 8.6 year over year. If you take out food, right, ex-food and energy, it's only up 6.8. That tells you how much
Food and energy are.
and energy
Exactly.
have really catapulted
But
that number.
food and energy is what hits people.
And
That's
exactly,
all-
absolutely.
everybody.
Most of your
It's
think
the
about it,
poverty tax. It's a regressive tax.
It's what it is. Just think about it. Most of your budget, the average person's budget is rent, groceries, and fuel.
Yeah.
Those are the three things. Now, rent, obviously, if you own a home, is mortgage, but it's
taxes
basically rent, groceries, fuel.
But the numbers is,
The rest of your spending is what's left over after that, because you have no choice. You have to pay rent, you have to pay groceries, you have to pay fuel.
So what's going to suffer in the economy? Jerry brought this up yesterday.
It's going to be the personal expenditures. It's going to be,
Yeah.
it's going to be things that you don't need, and also
Non-discretionary.
and also the durable things you can put off. The new washing machine, you put it off. The new car,
Happy
you put it
hours,
off.
going out to dinner,
You put it off.
restaurants.
Those service
Anything
industries,
you
coffees.
can put off,
Vacations.
you put
Yeah.
off, because a larger chunk of your budget is now being eaten by rent, gasoline, and groceries.
Does anybody here know what the average salary increase is percentage-wise?
It's not
What?
six,
And
but-
which industry?
Just overall.
What wage growth is?
Like 3 to 4%?
Yeah, 3%.
It's like it's
that's-
under 1 to 2%, I would think, right?
Yeah.
So-
It's
And
large.
I don't know
real-
the number, that's the reason
so,
I'm asking.
Well, so nominal is higher. The problem is you'll see wage growth, right? Wages are up 3%, right? Typically, the issue is that's nominal, meaning it hasn't been adjusted for inflation. Because if your wages go up 3%, inflation goes up.
Well, that's the
up
point
You're
I'm trying to
losing
get
money.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that's
losing
the key
money.
point.
You're 3%.
Real
under.
wage growth is sub 1.
Yeah.
By the way, just to kind of push how important it is to buy your home, right? So we talk about rent, and rent can increase year over year. Your mortgage payment does not increase year over year. I mean, granted, I understand property taxes may go up, but there's the beauty of it. Not only do you now have a stable number that you say every single month, this is what I pay for, quote, my rent, right? Because I now own it, so I'm paying principal interest. But second of all, you are building equity. In other words, you have an investment. That house, because every single month you pay a little bit of the principal on the amount that you borrowed, you are now basically building equity. So even if the market value of that house never goes up, right? You own more of that house, therefore your money grows. So
your equity increases.
yeah, it's great.
So it's really interesting. I had several conversations with 20-somethings and 30-somethings, master's degrees, super intelligent folks that thought the mortgage payment tracked just like rent does. They thought their mortgage, and to a certain degree, they're a little bit right? Because your taxes will change,
There's a portion
the insurance
that
will
does.
change,
Right.
but your principal and interest is locked in for 30 years,
Yeah.
right? And it's never going to go up on that end of it. And and it kind of just put me back in my seat that they didn't quite. That was not taught to them, and that was not explained to them in that way.
Partly
And
because it is a generation that grew up paying on rent.
Well,
You were their
personal
only
finance-
experience.
Personal finance is undertaught in the country.
Personal finance is undertaught. But if your initial experience as a person living on your own is rent, who's going to tell you that there's another world out there that when you enter the world of mortgages, it doesn't work that way?
Well, it's us, and that's what we're doing right now.
Exactly. That's what we're.
Neil Williamson, for Xavier, whip inflation now, win 1974, one of the worst PR efforts ever.
Yeah.
He wants to bring that up on the program. Other questions are on the show. Besides Latinos, what are the large purchasing groups in real estate here in Central Virginia for Keith? And this question's come in. How do you guys advise your clients with purchasing homes versus investing into market? So 3 good questions right there. Why don't you go, Neil Williamson watches the program a lot. We love him. President of Free Enterprise Forum. Whip inflation now, win 1974, one of the worst PR efforts ever. You guys want to talk about that at all?
So when you say whip inflation, what is it?
He's sharing a link to Liberty Street Economics. Why don't I'll jump into this link here. And Neil, if you want to offer more into this for us to talk about, how about you guys hit the buying home versus investing into the market?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned before, buying a house is probably going to be the biggest investment you make ever, right? And the beauty of it is that somebody's lending you money to buy that investment, which is a home. It's a catch-22. When do you buy it? As Keith said, a lot of people are now coming into this time frame with a lot of cash, a big down payment, and I think that's important. Having skin in the game, I think, is critical to making this housing market continue to grow properly, right? So it's a little bit of both, right? At first, you need to be able to save in order to buy this house that you want to buy, and then when you buy the house, right? And the important thing is always to think about, how do I then begin to put a little money away for either you have children for their education, maybe you want to buy a home for vacations, and obviously for retirement. And depending where you work, they may be 401k plans, but buying a house is a critical component of somebody's total financial plan.
Owning a home is a path to generational wealth.
It's
Period.
true.
But to Xavier's point, and I agree with you, there are multiple paths to generational wealth.
Sure.
Right.
No, which is true. Usually when we're talking with clients, the discussion tends to be not so much, do I not buy a home and invest my money, but rather, how much do I pay off of this mortgage? In other words, do I even get a mortgage? Surprisingly enough, there are people who will come to us and be like, do I pay off? Do I try to find a house where I can pay off tons of it, or prepay this mortgage as fast as I possibly can? And that's more working with them saying, well, what's the mortgage rate? What's the rate that you think you can get in the market? And that's the question, because it's not so much, it's kind of rare when you get someone who says, I want to have my own home, but should I not buy a house and put all my money in the stock market?
I have a question. Are they talking about like investing in real estate as if you already have a house, or are they
I think they're talking about what Alex is saying, like
Okay,
the
that's what I
first,
thought.
the
Yeah,
first
just
one.
First
Yeah,
home.
yeah.
Usually the first time home is you're ready to do.
Because you need a place to live.
You need a place to live.
Yeah.
Until you want to own your own home. It's not really. I can't imagine. I can't remember anyone who's ever come to us and said, I'm thinking of a first-time home as an investment decision, and should I do that or invest in the stock market? No, I want to buy a home.
Yeah, but you can have
What's
that
the best way
investment
to do it?
conversation, because we had it yesterday with Emily, right? Emily Funk, our client care coordination. I believe Nikki said that, maybe you might want to consider getting into a home now. It may not be your permanent home, then do exactly what Jerry has done, rent it out, and then move into your forever home.
Oh,
or
absolutely. I
something
mean, it is an investment decision.
It's going to be a case-by-case
What I'm
basis.
saying is,
Sure.
typically, though, it's not, when people are ready to own a home, it's not primarily an investment decision.
So-
In other words, there's a component of I'm ready
Need a
to.
house.
So there's
to
a
have
whole
my home.
component here that we're not talking about. We're talking about the average, folks are not putting 20% down like they used to. That whole is a bit of a misnomer, right? But you're starting to see it pick back up again because that is skin in the game. So now we're having a whole conversation about, look, we're talking about numbers and maths. Now I got to get it. I've got to
Yeah.
win the deal, right?
Well, why you're seeing it pick up around here is because it's so competitive to purchase a house.
That's exactly
You
right.
need to make offers that are more appealing to sellers than ever before. And the no money down offer is just not going to appeal to someone selling their home when there's 5 or 6 other ones on the table.
So here's a little tidbit on it. If you put a certain percentage down, it depends a lot on your personal financing and all that stuff. You can waive an appraisal, right? So there's different percentage down based on your financial situation, but it's somewhere between 20 to 30%. But there are paths there, to Jerry's point, then from buyer's perspective, and I'm trying to negotiate to buy your home, that path, there's one little check that you as a seller don't have to go through, right? Where it can possibly blow up at the last minute. So if we have a little bit more cash in the game, and you're starting to see that go that way.
So as strange as it sounds, it made you a more attractive buyer
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
from this. I mean, you're.
Well, so then it's interesting because then this is the kind of question that's also why you need to have professionals that like converse with each other, because learning from Keith learning from us, like having that conversation, when you approach your financial advisor on this subject, one of the things you should be is like, here's my real estate agent. This way you talk him, because one of the things we always do, and it's not always just with real estate, is okay, we have a question about this. First thing we'll do is we'll check with like our CPA, and we'll just have the conversation. We'll be like, Brian, we've got this client that wants this and this. This is what we're thinking to recommending. Do you have, pick it apart? What do you think? Like, this is why having multiple professionals that specialize in industries is important, because then somebody comes to us and be like, well, I'm talking with Keith Smith about buying this house, and we'll be like, first thing we're going to do, call up Keith. Like, we got this client, like, wants to invest, wants to buy a home. We're going to communicate, find out, like, what's the best path to them getting this house, because getting the house is important, right? I mean, you don't want to lose out on the house because you want to play the market. Or you want to get invested, or you want to add to your portfolio. Like, at the same time, have, again, as Alex said, like, there's a utility to having your own home. So
We've actually run across a couple situations recently where not first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, retirees, where they're buying a house in cash, then refinancing it, taking the cash out and putting it into the market.
Well,
So-
that question just came in from Jackson Carini. For the ERPs, do you, literally what he just said, have you seen clients take equity out of homes and put it into market in their financial portfolios? That's ballsy. Is that ballsy?
No, well, it's bullshit. Yeah.
It depends.
It all depends on what.
Depends
Yeah.
on your risk tolerance and your time horizon.
Yeah.
Right. If you're saying I'm going to pull equity out because I'm going to want to make a bunch of money in the next 1 year, and then I'm retiring next year. No.
That's ballsy.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Well,
I've not seen the first. Usually those
I'd
kind of people
use
are not
a
hiring
more
us.
negative term
They're
than
doing it
ballsy.
on their own.
You're saying that's not a smart idea.
that's not a smart idea.
but this is not ballsy. This is just a tactic to get the home. They have the cash. They're buying a home in cash. They're refinancing 50% of it, right? Then they're taking other 50% and giving it to you guys to refinance it. They're not taking any equity out of the house. It's just a path to secure
Secure
the home.
And it does
But
make
just-
sense, because, it is what a lot of people don't realize is that not all debt is bad.
Right.
There's good debt and there's bad debt. Mortgage debt,
Is good debt.
if your mortgage rate is low, if your mortgage rate is, just using example, 3.5%, and you can go out there in the market and over a long period of time earn 6 to 7% annually, that you're netting that amount.
Exactly.
You don't have to sit there and say, I need to pay off this entire home because I don't want to have any debt. That can sometimes be a serious mistake.
Particularly
right,
how it
depending on
impacts
time
your
horizon.
taxes, because they're not going to drop the mortgage credit at
Exactly.
the moment anyway.
Exactly, because you're getting on both ends, because you're deducting those mortgage payments from your taxes, and
Interest.
you are now in the mortgage interest payments, and you are investing in the market at the same time.
But you got to pay, you do have to pay taxes on the interest and any capital gain.
Retirement account.
Right, well, that's different, but that somebody that does that is not going to put, they can't put all that money into a retirement account.
No, they could put some of it if you're
But you
making-
can net
What's it,
minus
6K?
taxes.
6 or 7, I mean, if you're a retiree, it's 7, right?
Yeah.
Seven?
Seven.
Yeah,
Okay.
7 a year.
Now, someone's working at 6 a year?
No, if you work, no, I'm saying if
No,
you're.
after age 50,
After age
it can be
50, you can put
seven
7.
into a Roth
yeah,
or a
into
traditional
Roth
IRA.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But you're netting that
This is
into
where you guys talk IRAs, right?
This is where we talk about IRAs. If you have a small business, you have even more
Yeah,
options.
there's a lot more you can do.
But the key is to
Own your own business.
recognize, to be smart and realize, yes, I can buy this home completely in cash. Doesn't mean I want it to stay completely in
That's
cash
exactly right.
forever.
That's right.
You may want to do that, especially if you have a good time horizon and you have a reasonable expectation that you are going to net between what you invest in and what you're paying out in the mortgage.
So this is why you hire trusted advisors
To
at
do
the
this.
table to go ahead and help you through that. But to go back to the Latino question, this conversation we're having takes time to learn.
Yes.
And that's what this apprentice process would be, to go through to help folks learn how you can best counsel your client, because the best counsel to the client may not be, buying your home 100% in cash, right? This might be a better path. Let's bring in the experts that go and have this conversation. There was another question, something about housing.
Which are the groups that are going to, besides Latinos, that are going to be impactful in Central Virginia real estate for making purchases?
Well, I think
That's one for you.
Yeah, I believe the Latino will grow. Let's face it, the numbers of the white folks, that is going to probably going to be the chunk of it for quite some time. But there's going to be a balance as we go over time. The African American community, it needs to grow in its own home ownership. It's one of the reasons why I'm so persistent on the Regional Housing Partnership, the Land Trust. I'm going down to speak for the next 3 days at the Governor's Housing Conference about this very subject on that end of it. So we as an industry need to raise these both up to equal or equal to or greater than.
Well, that's how you close that wealth gap, right? Because we always talk about the wealth, we hear a lot about the wealth gap.
Right.
And wealth, let's face it, the number one means by which most white Americans from the 1950s to now grew their wealth by so much is because they owned a home.
That's exactly right.
It's not because they were extremely savvy investors and they went in the stock market and picked winners all the time. It's because you owned a home over a very, like the family, obviously. The family owned a home over a very long period
So
of time.
I don't have the exact numbers, but rental net wealth is in the thousands. Somebody who owns a home is in the hundreds of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And you saw that a lot of immigrants, I mean, when they came to this country, their goal was to own a home, right? Buy a home. And when you saw them, and at the end of their life, that was their net worth, was their home, and sometimes just a little bit of retirement,
Business
but
ownership should
that was
pick
it.
up too. Because the number one way to actually become it's a little different statistic, but the number one way to become a millionaire is own your own business. It's not play the market. A lot of people think like, oh, it's you go into the stock market and you pick a winner. It's not. It's you build a business. So you're going to have those in tandem, people who are building businesses, because we're seeing Latinos and African Americans pick up on the business ownership.
Yes, very much so.
So building their own business is going to go hand in hand with owning your own home, because you'll be able to afford it, because you'll be able to go into the market, because there's a lot more opportunities for business owners of structuring retirement. All those things are going to come hand in hand.
In everything, diversification, diversity is key. In everything, right? You got to be diverse.
So what do you guys think with this area? What's I'll throw this to you, Xavier. How do you see this shaking out in the next 3 to 5 with this area? Do you just see it turning into little San Francisco, a little Palo Alto, a little
no.
Silicon Valley? I mean,
Please, no,
Please
San Francisco, I've been there.
I mean, I don't see how it's not going to.
I mean, it's,
And why don't you like San Francisco?
no, so I originally, I mean,
How much time you got?
I spend one of my stops in my honeymoon was San Francisco, and I've been there before that on business also, and I loved it. It's a beautiful city, and it was a great city at one point, but by the time I left, that city was just overrun by homelessness, and the homelessness that it was overrun by was not a pretty one, right? I mean, what was happening in the streets is something that you don't want to describe. So that's not what you want out of your city, because you saw people didn't even go back into the city in order to do shopping. Malls were created way outside, so people didn't have to go back in, and it just eventually destroys that city, in my opinion. So the answer is, I don't know. I mean, you don't want Charlottesville to become that, you know, and I think it's funny because I remember when Keith's father was here and we talked a little bit about that. You go to certain cities because of the quality of life, and you want to make sure that quality of life continues to exist. And growth of a city is important, but you have to make sure that that growth is created in such a way that doesn't just attract a certain type of business. And prices go through the roof, and before you know it, you have a small little city that nobody can afford, right? And let's face it,
what I fear.
And it's not
You
the
want
kind of
per capita growth, not just total economic growth. And per capita means per person, basically. So in other words, if you double the GDP of Charlottesville, but you double the number of people in Charlottesville, every single person is in the exact same boat they were before.
Right.
You want per capita growth. You want more people to the extent that then causes everyone who's currently living here to also be lifted up by that. And so that's the key, is can you have growth?
I don't think that's
that
happening
is per
here.
capita.
No.
Right now, I don't see that happening. I see more people, which pushes up, and more companies, which pushes up your GDP, but I'm not sure I see it.
because unfortunately
necessarily
you're
growing
importing
everything
talent
else.
as opposed to allowing talent to grow from inside, and that's a big issue.
So to play off of Jerry's question, we talk about this all the time. There's where we're sitting, there's 3-4 major buildings coming in with what we figure 800, 400
At least.
folks, high-paying jobs coming in. So to your per capita perspective, right, it's kind of going to be a little bit lopsided,
Yeah.
right?
It is.
On that
Well,
end.
and the issue is, are they hiring those 400 people from here, or are they bringing them in from elsewhere? And the answer
They're bringing it from out.
They're bringing it from out.
Yeah.
If they're bringing it from out, you're adding to the population. You haven't increased per capita wealth of the people already living here.
And on top of that, UVA is bringing in more students and hiring more staff. So, I mean, I hate to say this and throw it back to you, Xavier. I love your perspective on this stuff. Value your perspective. I mean, it seems to me Charlottesville, Albemarle County are going to turn into just a little playground for super wealthy. And then you have this radius of maybe 30 to 45 miles of the service folks that work for the people in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. That's service Charlottesville and Albemarle.
Well, all I can say, Jerry, is let's hope that doesn't happen. I
Amen.
mean, it's beginning to happen, and I think, hopefully, I mean, we also have a new city council, so hopefully they're smart enough to try to figure this out and say, wait a minute, we have to make sure that what happens to the city is not what's happened to cities across the U.S. where it's, people don't even want to live there anymore, or the quality of life has been such that it's declined, right? You want the quality of life that's here in Charlottesville to continue to grow, to become better, and as Alex said, you want everybody to prosper, because the minute you have a situation where you have just a very small group of people prospering, everybody else falling by the wayside, it's a disaster.
It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, that's like Greenwich, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I would, the one thing
We have a
that
lot to
gives
say
me-
about that.
That's right.
My daughter lives in Norwalk. I know a little bit about Greenwich.
Yeah, Fairfield. What were you saying,
The one
Alex?
thing I would say from an optimistic standpoint is there are still a lot of groups and nonprofits in Charlottesville that recognize small business as being valuable and that push to grow local small business. So as long as there is that, as long as we don't forget that, and those groups continue to prosper and help the small businesses in this community grow, that's where you want your growth to come from. Because that's your local person who is growing their business and is spending it also locally. And that's what increases your per capita wealth.
How can you how can the government alter what's happening here? And neither of us are super, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm not super huge fans of government getting into
You can
the
speak
private. Okay, government getting into the private sector. I despise that. But I would think that in some ways that economic development within City Hall or Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, if the economic development can entice businesses come to this area with the caveat that they have to hire from within the community as opposed to bringing their employees from outside the area, that could slow this down in some capacity. And I would also love to see local government in some ways like prioritize STEM for students that are growing up in this area, especially the under-resourced minority students that are growing up, science, technology, engineering, math in this area. I'm curious of what you think.
No, I agree 100%. One of the things that you see in places like these particular cities, you also need a city that's thriving, right? Because one of the things you see is you have students from that are grown here in Charlottesville. They go to college, and sometimes they go away to college and then never come back, right? And those are the people that you want them to come back. And also, if you have people that grow here, go to this college, go to UVA, go to colleges around the area, and make sure they stay here and they've got that talent.
Like your boys.
Yeah, exactly. And we talk about this on our show also, Tene Mañana. The small business is the backbone of America, in my opinion, right? And the one thing that I despise is when government becomes a challenge to small businesses because they don't have the wherewithal to fight that. You know, it's a big company, I mean, like even in our business, there's a compliance officer, so there's compliance that you have. And so compliance officer for a big company can pay him like $200,000. I got my compliance officer, I'm good to go. A small company paying $200,000 for somebody that once a year is going to take a look at your compliance and says, you guys are good to go.
It'll be all their revenue for the year.
It's a burden, right? So small businesses have all this red tape to go through, and it's expensive, and they just have a tough time growing, right? And that's where I think government has to step aside and say, no, we love the small business. We want them to grow, and therefore we can't hamper them in any way.
But it's across the board, right?
Yeah.
Red tape needs to be turned into green tape. We
Yes.
talk about this all the time.
Yes.
And I'll do a little bit of selfish plug for myself and for the Regional Housing Partnership. The reason why it's so important is we have the small business folks at the table, as well as the government folks, the local governments, and they're, at least they're having this conversation. All of us know government takes a long time to do anything, right? But to go back to Jerry's comments in that conversation, we have 3.3% unemployment rate here in our footprint, car footprint, and what they call the MPO. Who are they going to hire, right? So they're going to have to bring people in, right? If these companies are coming in, they're going to have to bring people in because the hiring pool isn't that deep. No?
But it also means you can also hire up. In other words, you got a good paying job. Do you seek to entice skilled labor here to move up to a higher paying level, or do you bring in a skilled labor from elsewhere? So you can also do it that way. I think part of it is also the nature of the business you seek to bring in.
That's the key.
I think that's the key, because if you think about it, there's a big difference between bringing in a business from outside Charlottesville that is going to hire, I'll just use the base example, like a brewery. Going to have to hire a lot of local people to begin to run this, train some skilled labor, but it doesn't have to be extremely specialized.
But a high-tech company.
A high-tech company is always going to bring in their own people.
Right.
They're going to, because you're coming in from a large city somewhere else, they're going to have extremely specialized people doing this. So it's part of the nature is what type of companies, and we know for a fact, like economic development offices, right? They go and recruit companies to come here. So part of the question
That's
is
their job.
who do you recruit to come here? What type of businesses are you seeking to bring in?
And then where government can help is what incentives are they giving to bring in? That's where government can help.
To play devil's advocate with you, if you're in economic development, I love this conversation. If you're in economic development and you only have 10.2 square miles to work with, the city of Charlottesville, how are you going to recruit like a brewery that needs warehouse space and ample building space to run a brewery? You're probably going to have to recruit a tech firm. You're going to have to recruit a tech firm that needs minimal office space.
The economic development is hampered, by zoning.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the story of the brewery from years ago that wanted to go to Albemarle.
And they just closed their tasting room in Roanoke. Did you see that? They went to Roanoke instead of Albemarle County. Albemarle County Board of Supervisors didn't make it happen, and they just shut down in Roanoke.
And come on, that would have been successful.
It would have killed it here.
Would have killed it here.
This is my issue.
And that's more of what you want to bring in.
Let's let Nick jump in.
No, I was just going to say that was my issue when we were talking about the government. Like, that's how they could also hurt. Because one of the things I always hear is, like, there's the emphasis of trying to create funds and do little grants here and there, and they're trying to pick and choose the businesses, but then they're raising taxes to do that. So you're there trying to play the game, and a lot of times I hear, like, I'll be driving, I'll see signs, no more breweries, no more wineries, no more of this stuff. And I'm like, part of the thing is what you want as the economy is if there's room for that to grow. Like, you may say, oh, we don't need more than 5 breweries, so we're not going to hire any more breweries. But if the people where you live want more breweries, those businesses are going to be successful. So you want them to basically kind of like be like, well, you know, you only have 10 square miles, but if everyone's clamoring for another brewery and that's going to bring benefits and jobs, because I mean, I remember the chamber, Alex and I went to a chamber analysis, this was a couple of years ago, but breweries can bring in millions of dollars worth of benefits just by the amount that they, so if that's going to be a successful company that has growth, like grassroots growth in Charlottesville, doesn't matter if it's like maybe there's less people because we're talking about the per capita growth. If a brewery is going to be a successful business that's going to give you everything you want, maybe not as much, but enough, go for it. Doesn't matter.
Well, so to bring it back to housing,
No.
right? This is a real estate show,
No,
guys.
gotta go for it.
No, but,
It's a
but we're
big
all,
piece of it.
But we're all saying the same thing, right? Red tape, green tape, Albemarle County is 3 to
Right.
4 months to get a building permit, another 3 to 4 weeks on the back end to get the CO. So you're eating anywhere between 4 to 5 months in time, just time.
And time is money.
Time is money to go ahead and do this. So there's multiple struggles here.
Right.
It sounds like, Nick, you were explaining NIMBYism to me.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
On that, which is, you know, in the housing space, a common thing. But, you know, to go back to the question about the rubber band, right? We talk about the rubber band all the time growing out. I received a phone call from North Carolina yesterday. I do a little consulting on the side, and there's a neighbor, let's call it, region down there that's on the peninsula, and they're trying to grow their affordable housing footprint, and I'm going to go down there next week and help them with it. But they're like Long Island; they're restricted with the water,
Right.
And they're trying to figure out how we can go ahead and do this. So we're going to go down there and talk about it. In this case, the Real Estate Association and the government got together to work on this, which is a good thing. So
Right.
partnerships, public-private partnerships, are really going to work in this, in my opinion. They do when they're done right, but, you know, government needs to be run a little bit like a business, a little bit less like a government on that end of it.
And I think the beauty of the public-private partnership is just you now have the private having a voice at the table. Instead of top-down never works. When
Sure.
the government says, this is what we intend to do, and you're gonna like it.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. When you go from the other way around, you say, okay, here's what all the different groups need. How can we make this work together?
So I
Someone
would
say,
not
listen.
have put in 10
That's
years
a
of
good
volunteer.
listen.
I'm an eternal optimist, right? I believe in that. You know, you don't get in my line of work without being an optimist. I really believe that we're inching our way there. Will we get there before the end of my existence in this business is a different story. But, you know, I'm excited. I'm going down to speak about this for 3 days. So I've been asked to do it. So at least
The interest is there.
they at least at the state level, they want to hear what this is about.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Good show.
Which is
Yeah,
what you want.
absolutely.
Gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts.
Well, I think the only closing thoughts I have is one, don't panic about inflation in the sense that don't let it destroy your life. It's here, right? And let's just hope it goes away in the right way. But, you know, with regard to, you know, real estate, I've always said if you want to, and I know Alex said it, you know, it's not an investment. It is an investment. It's not in a sense that when you buy a house you don't think of it as investment, but it is.
It is.
It's just a great investment because it also becomes your home. And I think you know, there's nothing like, you know, you tap your, you know, home. You know, I want to go. What was the
Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home.
I don't like that movie,
Well
but I
done.
remember the home
Well
thing.
done.
I was gonna say, before I was gonna make fun of Keith because I got a ancient Greek poem. The Hesiod lists three things: a house, a wife, and an ox for the plow.
There you go.
Three things you start with: works and days. Famous work of ancient Greek like wisdom poem.
Now
Let me
it's
see. We did
now it's an
The
F-150.
wife.
We did.
No. We did
I was like, you got one of
we
those,
did the
right?
Russian, not Russian. We did the Roman Empire, Greek Empire. Anything
Yeah.
else that we missed?
I mentioned French.
Okay, French. Got it.
You had
French
a joke.
military.
I had,
You
but
had- No,
Jerry
that's
won't let me
the
tell
same.
it. No. It's a dad joke. And,
Oh, what
No,
do
we
it.
haven't
I
done
love
a dad
dad
joke yet. Do a dad joke.
Do a dad joke.
No.
What's the dad joke?
Come on.
Okay. So when you put your index finger up and your middle finger up and you form a V, so this is a history question. And I'm serious. I really want to know what this means. So in the 60s, it was
Peace.
peace. In the 40s, it meant Victory. So if I'm at the Colosseum in Roman times and I stick my finger up like this, what does it mean?
5.
5 hot dogs, please.
Yep.
Did they
Told
have
you it was a hot dog.
I like that one though. I like it though.
Sorry,
Oh,
guys.
I
Sorry,
love it.
everybody.
I love it.
Everybody had to go.
I
No,
want
I
to
love
plug
it.
before
I
we
love
go
it.
for today, Manana.
I love it.
What you
Today,
got
Montana,
Thursday?
we got artist on Thursday. So Bob Aller, he's the artist that did a lot of paintings of Cuba.
Oh, really?
He went down to Cuba and painted recently.
Wow.
And painted just the people there,
actually
the
been
things
there
that
a
are
bunch.
happening, beautiful scenes of Cuba. So a little close to our heart of having him on and
Ooh.
talk a little bit about Cuba. So it'll
Cool.
be nice.
That's one of my wife and I's dream visit.
Same
That's
here.
in our bucket list.
Same here.
The Erpe Family, guys, does a
Absolutely.
fantastic job with Today y Mañana, Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. Must watch content. Nicholas Erpe does a fantastic job of booking that show, the Social Media Ninja.
does.
And the closer and the Antonio Banderas of Finance co-host the show, 10:15 a.m. on Thursday mornings. Mark your calendar. Keith Smith, you are on hiatus for the next two shows.
I am on hiatus just Friday. I'm back on
Okay,
Monday.
okay.
I'll be down in Norfolk speaking at the Governor's Housing Conference. And
Good luck with that.
excuse me.
Good luck with that.
Thank you. You know, they made the mistake of inviting me, so. They wanted to actually plan, so what are you going to say? Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I got this. Hey,
let
guys,
you know.
thank you. We're going to do this on a regular
was fun,
basis.
guys.
I just looked at the phone for the first time. It's like 10 to 12, so thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you very
guys.
much.
This is a
Thank
lot
you
of
to
fun.
Judah.
Thank you, Judah.
For Keith, Nicholas, Alex, Xavier, my name is Jerry. This is Real Talk on the I Love Seville Network. We will see you in approximately 38 minutes with the I Love Seville show. You guys have a good morning. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Good job, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. It was a lot of fun.